Welcome to the Comic Watchers, episode 240. I'm flying solo tonight. Chad is, and with me I have a murderer's row of comics creators who are currently part of a uh, project on Kickstarter called Pots and Panels. So I'll let them go around and introduce themselves. And why don't you, while you're introducing yourself, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with comics as a reader and creator?
I don't want to go. Well, I'll go first. My name is Chuck Satterlee. I am a comic book writer, I guess, in theory, and I'm the person who thought up Pots and Panels, and I'm kind of responsible for putting 87 different creators together to make this book. We are hoping. I can, newsflash, we will fund. That's happening. I can guarantee that. But I hope we fund through the ways we want to fund. We will fund. Pots and Panels is a anthology that is 50 food themed stories. And the unique thing about this book is not only are they food themed stories, but a number of creators, over 60 creators, have submitted recipes. So it's a comic cookbook anthology. So there's stories and recipes, but on top of the recipes, there are stories about why those recipes are special to them. So you get a little bit of personal touch. So I'm really excited about the book. It's going to be 440 pages, and past that, I've done a few things in independent comics, and I think the couple things that are that I'm most proud of. I worked on a book called Of Bitter Souls with my friend Norm Brayfogle, and then a book called 13 Steps with Phil Hester. And I'm just in awe of all the other names here, so I'll shut up.
And well, also, what's your comic origin as a comic book reader?
Oh, I I am a product of First Comics being younger. That's why I'm such a big Hilary fan. That's why Norm and uh, I, so all those creators that came out of First Comic, I was a huge fan of. John Ostrander and Tim Truman and Mike Gold, and he was an editor, but then and everybody who was working back then. So obviously Steve and everybody who was making comics back then around the First Comics time. So that's my origin of comic reading. Brian Augustine, loved Brian, and Alan Grant, Stephen Grant, anyone named Grant. But those are the creators that I love, that who formed everything that I am about comics.
And we'll go to Hilary.
Hi, yes, I'm Hilary Barta, and I'm one of the idiots that got Chuck involved in comics, apparently. So you always got to be careful what you put out there. You never know what it'll lead to. Now, I've been drawing comics for a while. I was at First Comics. I started as an inker at Marvel, and I worked at Marvel in DC, but the independent comics were kind of always pulling me because I knew I didn't quite fit in with mainstream superhero stuff. Those weren't the stories I wanted to tell. I certainly couldn't really draw, a monthly superhero book. That wasn't my thing. So, and so, gosh, somewhere around here, I have I used to have it clipped up on a corkboard on the wall. But I had a 3-panel sequence from an early issue of the Hulk. I'm talking like early 1960s. A Kirby drawn sequence where the Hulk is getting angry and it's kind of the camera, the framing is moving in on him. So I was the comics back then. I don't know that I was buying them. It might have been my older brothers, and so I think Marvels were the first comics I saw as comic books. but I had been reading comic strips. You know, I just grew up with old movies, comic strips, all kinds of things, that visual art, visual storytelling. And, you know, that's what I do. And I found my niche is in kind of a weird humor area, which kind of at first comics in Munden's Bar in the back of Grimjack. That was one of the places I started to find my own voice, I think. And I've worked on other strips like Plastic Man, Splash Brannigan, done a lot of humor stuff like Simpsons and SpongeBob, things like that too. Yeah.
Okay. Neil.
Sure. So my weird origin story is pretty typical. I mean, I was your basic 80s kid growing up with mostly Marvel and DC in suburban Michigan. You know, I'd pick up books at 7-Eleven or at the local bookstore. We didn't really have a whole lot of dedicated comic shops where I was. And so my dad actually had bought comics before me. And I'm also Jewish, so we celebrate Sabbath over the weekend. He'd come in Friday night with a bag of comics, throw it at me and my brother, and basically say, "Leave me alone, go read those." And that's how he got some sleep. And so we really built like a collection over time, but it was all like Marvel Team Up, Marvel 2-in-1, DC Comics Presents, a lot of team books, a lot of licensed books like Sectors and G.I. Joe and Transform, like all that kind of stuff. And so I grew up thinking comics equal superheroes. And I started to teach myself how to draw a little bit by tracing some of the comics. And then I actually picked up a couple of Ninja Turtle books when the Ninja Turtles came out and started tracing that. And when I moved to New York in the late 90s, I fell in with a crowd of Brooklyn cartoonists who taught me that comics can be really whatever you want them to be. And I started to learn how to craft my own stories outside the concept of spandex, writing superheroes and doing a lot of like dramatic books and crime books, slice of life, mini comics. I really kind of worked my way up from like mini comics to web comics to my own self-published stuff, and then to graphic novels. And I'm like that guy who you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of you. I've heard that you did a story here and a book there. I'm still kind of like making my way in the business, but I've done work for NBM, for Dark Horse Comics, for Marvel, for DC, for a bunch of folks, dabbled in prose. One of the books that I did was called Savor for Dark Horse with my buddies John Broglie and Frank Reynoso. And Savor is this YA graphic novel about an adventuring chef who learns how to be a hero. And when Chuck, who I met years ago when I did a book called Brownsville, had reached out to me to ask me to be part of the book, it just seemed like a natural fit for us to do another Savor book. So I'm really excited that we get to revisit that world and do a little short story on the high seas with our pal Savor.
It's a beautiful story. I'm just glad it's in there.
It's definitely got probably the longest title in the book, right?
It's tied. There are two stories that are that long. So
okay.
And Stephen.
Oh, well, like Neil. Well, I'm sort of like Neil in that if conventions are anything to go by, I'm that guy who you really liked that story, but you had no idea I wrote it. So I get that all the time at conventions. People come up, I went through my collection when I saw your name on the list. I didn't even realize you wrote that. I really love that story. So anyway, I mean, I've been writing comics for, I don't know, my adult life, pretty much my whole adult life. I only had one real job in my life, and that was before this. And I got started in comics when I got sick, and this was back when, you still got measles and mumps and things like that. And I forget which one it was, but I was stuck in bed, and this is 1961, so TVs were still too big to move from room to room, and I was in bed, so I couldn't move to the TV. So my father bought me a copy of All-Star Western to amuse me while I was convalescing, and that was fine. I loved that. I had no idea until much later how much it affected my tastes, but it was drawn by Gil Kane and Carmine Infantino, so eventually those became big influences on me. But There was a ad in there for the Justice League of America, which is one page that had just this banner across the top. Just imagine, and then down this big arrow going down the side. Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This arrow going down to all in one comics magazine, the Justice League of America. And I saw that, and I had no idea I had never heard of any of these characters. I had no idea what this was, and I saw it, and I thought, what is this? And I just couldn't wait to get out of bed, to get to the store to find this comic. And I never did. Found the next issue, and that's kind of tipped me into reading comics. And from that point, I was already reading by then. So, but by that point, I basically read every comic I could get my hands on. It didn't matter what the genre was. Took me a while to get into Marvel. It was mostly DC originally. Took me a while to get into Marvel, and eventually, I progressed from wanting to read comics to wanting to write comics, and this is probably in my teen years, but by the time I was in my 20s, I had moved beyond wanting to write comics, at which point I was offered the chance to write comics. So I kind of wasn't going to, and then I thought, well, I'm not really making any money at anything else, so this isn't much money, but it's at least money. And I started writing comics, and turned out I kind of liked doing it. And from then on, it was, it was just things kept going. And eventually I did, I achieved some mild fame with the Punisher miniseries, and went on to create Whisper for First Comics and a couple of other books for them, and just went on from there. They've done various things for various companies over the years. Mostly when I'm left to my own devices, I do crime comics. And when Chuck asked me if I wanted to do a story, I had actually written something for PJ Holden just for him to draw for a drawing exercise. He wasn't going to do anything with it, which was the one-page version of the story that I did for Chuck, because I liked the punchline on the story. It's a silly little story. Oh, but it's my probably the only zombie story I will ever write in my life, because I hate zombie stories. So that was a lot of fun. And I guess the only other things you really need to know about me is that I like a lot of things on pizza. So.
Well, Stephen, a lot of the books that I talked about that I kind of grew up reading had your name on them, like The Punisher for sure, X from Comics Greatest World. Actually, you did a book called Badlands that I love. So,
oh yeah, well, Badlands is probably that was probably my single favorite book of all the books I've done for various reasons. But
I just love I loved Whisper because I was back then I was younger, I was very young, and I was reading Whisper and Grimjack and John Sable Freelance and all of it. That company, I think more than maybe any other company in history as far as independence, and I would include Image in that, spawned countless incredible career. It just spawned countless incredible careers. First Comics did.
Well, for the most part, it was us being left to our own devices. So, yeah.
I liked that I could just walk over there. I could. It was in Evanston when they were in Evanston, near where I grew up. It was just like there's a comic book company on Davis. So I just had to work there, And it helped that I like Mike. I mean,
Mike Gold is I think he's a fantastic visionary, someone who did a whole bunch for this industry. He doesn't get enough credit, I think.
He's quite a character too.
Yes, he is.
We won't go into what the original name of First Comics was. So.
Was it Second Comics?
No.
No. Okay, good.
It started with an F and ended with DC. So.
All right.
So Chuck, what was the inspiration for the Pots and Panels anthology?
Well, excuse me. So COVID hit 2020. All of us were stuck inside. I had been out of comics. When you're an independent creator, and you have a family, you either, you know, make a lot of sacrifices or you decide not to make sacrifices. I decided for about 8 years there to not make the sacrifice of being a comic book creator. I loved it, but I had grown up in foster homes and group homes, and I grew up in the system, and I was thrown around a lot. One of the reasons I love comics is because I could lose myself in comics when I was younger. So I didn't want my son, and then ultimately my adoptive son, to not have all my attention as a parent. So I stepped away from comics. But then COVID hit, and um, we were really, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty bored. I did my career outside of comics is insurance, and it's a little bit different. As far as insurance, I'm not the guy who goes into a living room and talks to you about your life insurance. I'm the guy who goes into an HR office and sells an HR department on taking a benefit that goes to hundreds of people. And so I would go into employers in person and speak to people at work. Nobody was going to work for 2 years, and I had nothing to do. We have since merged and phased into Zoom meetings and Zoom enrollments and all that crap. But I was bored, and so my wife and we started cooking. We were watching food shows on TV, and we're not chefs. Like I couldn't tell you how to cook something from scratch, but I can read, and and so we started following recipes, and we got adventurous. We would take recipes that we would never have tried before, and then we went and got the ingredients, and we made dishes that we never had, and we started doing that all the time. And then we became ridiculous foodies. We started mixing wines with foods like everybody else does, but we discovered that during COVID, mixing beers with foods. We got really into it. And then I found out that I got back into comics because I'm an idiot. And uh, I found out that a bunch of my buddies that I hang out with online and in person were also foodies. And so we thought the name Pots and Panels came up drinking one night, and we thought, hey, let's do a podcast since we're all bored. That's how it came out. And then from the idea of a podcast, which never happened, the anthology happened, and then the recipes and everything else. So that's how it happened. It was born out of boredom during COVID.
And how did you go about recruiting people to, contribute to the anthology? And I guess the question is for everyone else, what was it about the project that appealed to you and made you want to be a part of it?
Well, I've been around a minute, so I've met a lot of people, and I hopefully have not pissed them off, and I have been able to stay friends with these folks. And I'm in sales. You don't get if you don't ask. So I asked. So that's about it. If anyone wants to say why they're in it.
I mean, look, I'll say some of the appeal was just everyone who's kind of involved with it. There's a lot of folks that I love, I admire, like some really great creators, both like superstars all the way down to up and coming independent creators. What I love is the fact that Chuck and his team has really gone the gamut and really looked at a range of folks and brought them in. But for me, I mean, I feel like there's a ton of great food comics out there, right? Like you look at like Chew, Space Battle Lunchtime, Bourdain did a couple of books for Dark Horse or Vertigo, I forget who. There's been some really great comic books and graphic novels out there about food, and Savor was, for me, like I had always wanted to do something that was food related. But there's always been for years, and I've been part of it, not part of it, this talk about like, hey, let's do a comic book cookbook. Right? Let's get a bunch of comic
Really?
together, and let's get folks that are like illustrating recipes, and because I feel like comedy, we love to eat. We love to go out to dinner and drink and talk about food and share recipes. Even if you're on like social media now on Blue Sky or I'll still call Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. I've always seen folks post up like, "Oh, it's Thanksgiving. I made this," or I made this apple pie, or I made what have you. And I think there's this just natural creativity connection between like making comics and making food. And so for me, that was really kind of what drew. Like I did want to do more of it, but for me, it was also about the opportunity to dive back into this world that I didn't think I was going to get to dive back into with Savor, and work with some pals again. And so that's why I came along.
Thank you for doing it too.
Okay, thank you for asking.
Well, like Steven said about First Comics, where they just would leave you alone. That's why they probably came up with so much good stuff at First Comics. I kind of like doing stories where people just, it can be, they'll tell you the length maybe they want, 8 to 10 pages or something. But when I heard this had a theme, Chuck was telling me about it. How loose is the food theme? And he said, well, it's pretty loose. I said, will I do a story cannibalism? And he said, sure. And I realized then that I could do whatever I wanted, and he wasn't going to say, oh, that's too out there, or no, that's not cooking with grandma in the kitchen or whatever. So it appealed to me that I had freedom. And Chuck has been asking me about working on different things for, I don't know, it's been a couple of years now, maybe since right before or right after COVID, probably after.
Right after COVID.
Yeah, right after. So, and but I've known Chuck I knew him a few decades ago back when we were both hanging out at what were then not called drink and draws, but were essentially drink and draws. Yeah.
It was wasn't it Thursday night volleyball?
Well, there was in Chicago there was volleyball, and I think comics came out on Wednesdays. So Wednesdays we would go to the Torchlight after picking up our comics at Haley's Comics on Lincoln Avenue and going kitty corner and then Thursday, I guess, for the hangover, everyone would play volleyball. But yeah, I forgot about the volleyball.
Yeah, that volleyball game was quite. I think it was like it was Biederstadt, Paul Fricky, right? He would.
Yeah,
sometimes, and
those two guys from Troll Lords were that was their church, so it was a church gym.
Yeah,
but over the years, the people that came and played in that gym, Mitch O'Connell, Alex Ross. Guys, Kirk Busick, people would just come through town and they'd hear there was a comic book volleyball game. And being a comic book creator is not necessarily determinant of athletic prowess or skill. So it wasn't exciting volleyball, but it was kind of amazing. Jill Thompson is there, standing in the middle of a bunch of guys. Anyway, it was fun.
It was hilarious and a blast. It was really fun. And it clearly they didn't really have any kind of entrance exam because I got to play in those games, and it was a blast. And yeah.
So anyway, Chuck, basically the reason I'm doing it is because of Chuck. I mean, that's if I didn't putting this book together, I might have said, I got better things to do. But Chuck was putting it together, and it looks like a real fun project when I see all the different things that are coming together. And it's huge. It is. It's ridiculously huge.
Yeah, it's too big.
40 pages.
Yeah, when I hear the numbers,
pages. It's crazy.
Ambitious. Why would you take on something this big? I'm glad I'm not, herding the cats in this scenario.
Well, I'm a glutton for punishment because we're going to take all the lessons we learned from Pots and Panels because again, it will fund. I can only say that, but I hope it funds the way we want it to fund, but it will fund. But we're going to take all the lessons we learned. And Stephen, you should talk in a second, but the next book we're going to do is called Adthology. And it's going to be a collection of stories that are dedicated to comic book ads from the 1950s to 80s. And, the submarine and all that. What, Stephen?
You should go back to the 40s, because in the 40s, that was the golden age of comic strip ads.
Okay,
where you had like
that.
Sam Spade selling Brill Cream and Captain Tootsie selling Tootsie Rolls and things like that. I mean, there was fantastic ads in the 40s. I mean, the ads, the comic strip ads that they have in comics in the 40s are often much better than the comics that are in the thing, because they're drawn by people like C.C. Beck and Lou Fine, and they're just they're fabulous.
Well, okay, we'll do that.
Tons of. But and I'm sure you can just use the ads if you want to. You don't have to make up new ads, because I mean that stuff somebody should have collected should have gotten permissions and collected a long time ago, because it's just wonderful stuff. But well, before I go on, Hilary, I just want to say that I really love the stuff you were doing with Alan Moore at ABC Comics.
Thank you,
You were doing at ABC Comics, although I do not envy you working for man Alan Moore's script.
Well, Splash Brannigan, I've heard of and seen copies printed of some of the more serious that he did. It was not in depth. But there was some background detail, in fact. But he didn't talk about what the guy had for breakfast before he entered the panel. It didn't get into the weeds there yet. So, but it was, yeah. But
as near as I can tell, Chuck recruited people by hitting up all of his Facebook friends. But
I am proud of the fact, though, that there are a few people like Stephen. I've never met you in person, but I'm an enormous fan. But a very large percentage of the people that are in this book, I know personally. I've known personally for either a couple years or 25 years, and I'm proud of the fact that they all don't hate me. So they were happy to work with in our book, and because I think to be able to stay around a long time and in the independent world and not piss people off, I look at it as an accomplishment, and I am proud of it.
So anyway, like I said, I already had a story when he asked me, so I thought, well, I'm not doing anything with this. I should expand it into something coherent, because the thing I did for PJ was just for him to get some drawing exercise in, and and I thought, wow, what the hell? Why not? So it sounded like fun. So I'm into fun these days. I like writing for fun.
Fun is a good thing. It's a good motivator, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how about we go around and you guys kind of talk about, without giving too much away, what your story is and kind of the inspirations behind it.
Well, we gave away everything in Stephen's story because it's in the Kickstarter. But anyway, I apologize. I digress.
Well, Neil, you want to go?
Sure. So I kind of alluded to it already, but I did this book called Savor. And just the quick pitch for Savor is that it's about this adventuring chef who goes away for X amount of years from her island home to learn how to fight and cook. And she comes back and finds out that her island home has been taken over by these pirates. And she has to face the 5 deadliest restaurants on the island, and in each restaurant get a piece of a sword that she builds to basically defeat the pirate king or whatever. And so it's about like a coming of age story. It's about learning to be a hero, and it's a lot of fun. John Broglie and I did it for our daughters, who were 8 or 9 at the time, and that was it. We did one book, and people who have read it loved it. fun thing about that book is that the day it came out was January 6th, 2021. So
Oh, good Lord.
nobody knew it came out. But since then,
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. And so we've always wanted to kind of return to that world. We did a short holiday comic strip for the internet like 2 years ago during the pandemic, set in that world. And then when Chuck came along and very generously offered me a spot in the book, like it just made a lot of sense. And so this story, which the title of the story is How Not to Cook for 20 Sailors, or How Saber Started a Mutiny on Her Very First Week, is set literally between that time where she leaves the island and comes back. And it's about like her first real big challenge. But it's food related, it's a lot of fun. I got to talk a lot about one of the great things about doing food comics is you get to talk about the food you love. And also, I'm a dad, so there's a whole lot of food puns in it. Both the graphic novel as well as the short comic that's in the book. But we had a blast. It was a fun story to do, and I hope people like it.
And do you guys do you have a recipe that goes along with it?
Yeah, so I sort of deviated from this. I know Chuck wanted like a personal recipe or a recipe that was like meaningful or what have you, and I have a lot of those, but it was hard for me to think of one that I love that connected to the story. So it's really not. And then Saber sort of takes on a life of her own. So she elbowed me out of the way and offered her recipe, and it's a recipe for tacos, which connects to like a fun little bit, like recurring bit that we do in the comic.
Okay.
And there were no rules, you know. I mean, just put a recipe in that you love, you know. So,
Well,
yeah,
it's a recipe that she loved, so I'm glad it's in there.
that's okay.
Yeah, when
As
I
long
was
as,
at
as long as they said yes, I didn't really care what they did because I just love all these creators so much. So,
yeah, well, yeah, at New York, I had the opportunity to chat with Eric Palicki about his story in the anthology. So that was a you know that was nice to hear and get his you know what he was writing about. Hilary, how about yourself?
Well, I think I mentioned doing Munden's Bar stories back in the days of First Comics, and Munden's Bar was a feature. It was in the back. It was a backup in Grimjack, set in the universe of Grimjack, in this pan-dimensional city called Sinisher, that the late I think Peter Gillis had come up with, but John Ostrander was using it in Grimjack, and it's where all these dimensions would meet. And Munden's Bar, this establishment, was in the Pit, which was kind of like the sleaziest low rent district in Sinisher, in that town. And I wrote a number of stories. I drew a number of stories from. It was really fun because they were short. It was kind of anything goes as long as you touched base with the bar at some point. And the story I did really is in some ways reminds me of the Munden's Bar stories. It's kind of, I call it Sinisher. I don't call it anything, but it's set in this sort of divey neighborhood with a bunch of weird creatures, human and otherwise. And you can tell it's the bad neighborhood because there's all the high rises just beyond your, all those little shacks and dives that the feature in the story. Anyway, it's about a food writer, and he writes about extreme food, and he gets in all over his head, I guess you'd say, in trying to find exotic or in this environment. And it's a series of gags, and I'm just having fun. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like going back to Munden's Bar, and I hopefully people will kind of get that. Maybe I'll put a little nod on Munden's in the background. I'll put Bob the Watch Lizard somewhere. I don't know. I'm sorry.
not at all.
But so, and I have a bunch of the art here. extreme cuisine. I just finished the page 5, Chuck. You can see some of the crazy stuff going on in there. Lots of chomp sound effects, sort of a bacchanalian, a food thing going on there.
Look at that weird thing called original art. That's
yeah.
bizarre. You draw on the you wait, so let me get this straight. You take what, like a writing utensil of some sort, and you put it on paper. It's like real.
Yeah, what gets me is that we have to qualify what we do now. That is us old farts. I have to say I work conventionally, or it's like it's art. I think everyone else ought to be qualified, digital, whatever. This is just art. It's just comics. Yeah. I use computers to communicate with people, but I don't. Once upon a time, I tried doing the color, and I like doing color, but I don't like working on computer. So, yeah, I've drawn everything I've ever drawn. I've drawn it on a board. So, there's a lot of us still out there. Trust me.
Well,
maybe Neil does this, but a lot of people now still draw, but then they use the computer at different stages. So it's a tool.
Yeah. So look, I also don't. I'm primarily a writer. I draw very sporadically, and when I do, it's all boards and micron pens and pencils, and I really don't do any work on the computer. The most I do is I'll sometimes scan in color, like in Photoshop or something like that, but I don't do a whole lot of that.
Yeah, I'm still dipping a brush and a pen into a bottle of ink, and
That's
if you
so
look
cool,
closely, when I blow up my pages, there's from where the pen skips and splatters. And in this story, it's appropriate because it's pretty divey, so everything should be a little gritty anyway. Yeah. So. But I would not recommend I would recommend the drawing process. I think working on paper is for people to try to do before they move on to computers. But I would not recommend my writing process, which is I'm making it up as I go along, and I have no idea what exactly is going to happen on the last page. But it's fun for me to do it that way. And if you're not doing like a 20-issue series or something, you don't have to worry about it that much. It's a short story. So
True that.
Yeah. That's part of the fun for me, Stephen. It's just surprising myself. I didn't see that coming.
I do that all the time. Like Hilary, I also did some Munden's Bar stories, and unlike Hilary, but mine, and very much in line with what I did for this anthology, I generally do not have a series of gags. I have one gag, and like in one of the Munden's Bars stories that I did was involved in exercising the corpse of the returning corpse of Elvis, called Old Blue Lips is back, and the title was the joke. But this one I can't really talk too much about because it's very short. And all I can say about the story is that the last living man on Earth is saved from certain death by the last living woman when they unexpectedly meet, and they have to figure out what to have for dinner. That's all I'm willing to say about it. I can't say whether my recipe is connected to the story or not, but it is a recipe for meatloaf. So
you can't go wrong with meatloaf.
Let's just say you have to have some pretty strong feelings about pizza to do what this main character does.
Yes, well, I actually, and I do want to say the story does not represent my feelings. The story was the joke I thought.
Oh, it's a great joke. especially for Chicagoans. We love our pizza, and to a lesser extent, you New Yorkers, Neil. You know. Anyway, I always have this argument with Jason Michalski, who's one of the co-organizers, because he's from New York. We always have Chicago versus New York pizza arguments. So,
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. Madison pizza beats both of them because I've had all three, and Madison pizza is better than both of them. So, although Madison pizza does derive from Chicago pizza because the main pizzerias up there was a family of brothers that came up from Chicago and then got into a feud and all broke up and started their own restaurants. But the best pizza I've ever had is in Madison. And New York pizza, the like famous Rays. I don't know, I mean, there's various original Rays, famous Rays, whatever it is, there's various Rays pizzas up there. I don't understand putting the vegetables on after the pizza's cooked. I never understood that. That always killed me on it. I don't understand having crusts that you hold it and the pizza like holds like this and the cheese just slides off of it because the crust doesn't stick.
Even you gotta fold the slice.
You do. You gotta fold it and then eat it like a sandwich.
Yeah, well, trust me, if you pick up a slice of Chicago pizza and you turn it sideways, it's gonna slide too.
I forget what the name of it. I forget.
But I will say that if you take a Chicago deep dish pizza, it's about the thickness of pots and panels.
Yeah, I know. I mean, deep dish
maybe in
pizza
Uno's, yeah.
It doesn't make much sense to me either.
So, my question for you, Stephen, is the guys that came up from Chicago, did they bring up tavern style Chicago pizza or did they bring up the thick crust? Because everyone around the world thinks Chicago is
probably tavern style.
Tavern style is better.
Well, tavern style is the original Chicago pizza. The thick crust is something that did take hold.
It's what I would call normal crust. It's not thin crust and it's not thick crust. It's in the middle and it's got a sort of a charred bottom on it so that it's a sturdy bottom. And you can hold it. You can hold it in your hand. You pick it up. You can hold it in your hand and eat it like it's a slice of pizza. What's the stuff that's literally like a sandwich made out of pizza folded in on it?
Calzone.
Calzone. That's my feeling about what you were saying about New York pizza. If I wanted calzone, I'd get a calzone.
What's wrong with calzones?
Well,
nothing's wrong with calzones, but if I want a calzone, I'll buy a calzone.
It's like a little football made out of pizza. It's amazing.
If you use your hand a certain way, you have these other fingers grabbing the outside of the crust, and then the other fingers can prop up the floppy slice. So you can eat it without folding it. A New York
but the great virtue of Madison pizza in that regard is that you can hold it by the crust so you don't have to burn your hand trying to hold on to it.
Well, another thing we do in Chicago with this tavern style is we cut our pizza in squares, as opposed to slices.
That's Detroit style pizza.
Cut them in triangles, Madison.
Well, Detroit style
pizza used to cut it in squares.
Detroit style is the weirdest pizza of all. I have friends from Detroit, and now there's Detroit pizza available here in the city. They put the sauce on top later, on top of everything, and it's just it's like drinking a pizza. It's really weird.
It's an inverted pizza.
Yeah, I guess so, but I mean, all the ingredients in all these different kinds of variations of pizza, if they're good ingredients, it's going to taste good, but you just have this. Stephen has a problem with this piece that won't, that flops around. I have a hard time with just like a half an inch of sauce on a thick Detroit slice.
It's funny you should say that because I remember years ago, but it's my favorite pizza story. Years ago, my wife and I went to Miami for a weekend and we got like a really good personal pie pizza and there was tons of sauce on the top of it. And we were running late. We had to get back to the airport to come back here. And we get to the airport, and we're going through security, and security stops us. And this was right, I don't want to say right after 9/11, but it was like still like people were looking for liquids and what have you. And the security guard stopped us and was like, "You can't take that through." And we asked him why. He said, "Because it's a liquid. Like half that pizza is a liquid." And we're like, "Pizza? Are you kidding me?" And they're like, "Well, why don't you leave that pizza with us?" I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to entire pizza right here in front of you, and then I'm going to go through security. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
How TSA almost stole my pizza.
Right. That should have been my story.
Yeah.
So Chuck, what are you offering through the campaign for people to the different levels of support?
That's a great question. Thank you. We have we have a digital level, where you can get the entire anthology, the whole book,
Is
all
this
the
still that
recipes.
thick?
Back in the day when we still had zip drives. Remember the zip drives? Those thick ass.
Oh, yeah.
You can get the digital version. That's called the sous chef tier. Then there's the soft cover version, which I want to. I don't remember, but you can get the soft cover. You can get a hardcover version, which is selling surprisingly better than I thought it would. I lost a bet in the organizer group because Jason Michalski wanted to do hardcover, and I'm like, I don't think people are going to buy a hardcover, and sure enough, people are back in the hardcover. We've got that. We've got metal bookmarks with some of the art. We've got a set of prints that are really cool because the prints, it's 6 prints that are homages to Norman Rockwell food-inspired paintings. Like remember the picture of, or the painting that Norman Rockwell did of the cop at the soda fountain counter with the little kid who ran away from home. We've got an homage to that by Jeremiah Scheich. There's just a whole bunch of different pieces in that by some great artists. In fact, you mentioned Eric Palicki, the artist who drew his story in the book, which is called 30 Minutes or Less, kind of a cyberpunk delivery, like a Uber Eats delivery story. His name is Vince Underwood. He did a piece in this book, or in the print set. So we got that. We got a T-shirt. We have a retailer tier, which is 10 copies for $250. So you get them for $25 a piece. The retail on it is $40. So we didn't want to go crazy because it's about the book itself. I think we have some fridge magnets that are going to be a stretch goal. But I don't know about you guys, but when I get a package, a Kickstarter package in the mail, and look, all respect to everybody who does Kickstarters, but I don't think I've ever once used one of the stickers or anything like that. And because I don't use them, I didn't put them in this anthology or in this Kickstarter. So maybe I made a bad decision because of it, but I don't know. But those are the different things that are available. I'm pretty excited about my story. I have 2. One is called, which, by the way, Neil and I have the 2 longest titles in the book. Mine is called 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds in the life of Chad Weston. That was drawn by Brooke Turner, who is, I've been a big fan of for a long time. He's one of the best artists you'll never, ever, ever see too often because he's not going to mind me saying this, so slow. So he can't really do a lot of comics. He did a book with Phil Hester called Golly at Image. It's just wonderful art. He's such a great artist. and then I brought, like Neil, I brought back some old friends. I did a book with Norm Brayfogle called Of Bitter Souls, and I brought back those characters for a few pages. It felt weird because I've never done one page of that book without without Norm, but it was fun to bring those characters back to life, and so I have two stories in the book.
And I noticed that looking at the list of creators, you have some new creators too, like the what comic book couples counseling husband and wife.
Brad and Lisa Gullickson. Yeah, they have a book called The Vegetable, drawn by Gerald von Stoddard, who more people should know about because he is a singularly wonderful talent artist. Yeah, but Brad and Lisa did a great story about a phobia of Brad's. They have a fantastic podcast. I think if you listen to podcasts, you probably have listened to Comic Book Couples Counseling, which is one of the greatest names for a podcast of all time. So yeah, we're really excited about that. We've got Travis Gibb, who does
Mhm.
great independent comic books.
Orange Cone.
Orange Cone, yeah. We've got Charlie McElvee, but at the same time, like Neil was talking about, we brought independent guys and big guys like Steve Niles, Phil Hester, Ron Mars is in this book. Andy Kuhn, Tim Seeley. He created, in my opinion, one of the most fun independent titles of all time, Hack Slash. I love Hack Slash. And then we have independent guys like Austin Hamlin and Jason Michalski and Carmelo, who are all my co-organizers on this team. So yeah, there are. I'm so into this that I made a challenge to the last podcast I was in. I stated that if you cannot stump me, you can tell me a name. I don't have anything in front of me. Swear to God, you could tell me a name. I will tell you the title of their story.
Uh, Trevor Mueller.
Trevor Mueller, Black Cherry Pie.
I mean, I was just, I don't have a list in front of me because my computer died in front of me, um, but no, I mean, it looks like I said, it looks like you have a lot of people who, you know, wanted to participate, and it looks like it's going to be a great project.
I hope so. I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy and thankful, sincerely thankful that so many wonderful creators have said yes. It has been a truly amazing task that the co-organizers have helped me with, to wrangle 87 creative minds, because it ain't easy, man. Creative people can be flighty.
Flaky.
Yes. And to get all these stories done and into one place. I'm really proud of that, and I think I think that when people hold that book in their hands, they're going to be entertained with those 50 stories, and I'm really happy that that book will stick around because hopefully they'll make the recipes in there too, like Mark Resnick. He's the drummer for the Toadies. If you are of a certain age, you know that the Toadies are a kick-ass band from the 90s that top charts. His story is about his mother's sauerkraut and dumplings, and and in the story itself and in the recipe, we actually have the print or the scanned handwritten cards by his now departed mother. She wrote the recipe in there, so that's in this book. I mean, that's cool.
My recipe is about dumplings too. So I guess we're a little, there's two of them. My grandmother's dumplings, and I still have the card, or at least I have a scan of the card. I forget who in the family has the card. Yeah.
If you can get it to me,
Well,
we'll put it in the recipe. We'll put it in the recipe itself.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got the scan somewhere. So.
And Chad, I've been doing we left a few pages, and so I wanted to offer something to you. I've been doing something as a thank you to those podcasters who are so gracious to give Pots and Panels some time and some attention and some exposure. We would like to offer to you a page of recipe in the book. If you have a recipe that you would like to include, we left about 6 pages for podcasters. So if you want to include a recipe in Pots and Panels, you can. Thank you for having us.
Sure. Oh, yeah, definitely. I will see what I can dig up for you and
Just
email
not,
it to you.
just not dumplings.
Oh,
Yes.
crap.
Yeah. But I guarantee you that those dumplings are probably couldn't be more different. I guarantee you. So
Okay.
let's face it, there are dumplings in every single different type of food. Asian dumplings. Everybody has dumplings. So I guarantee you they're going to both be great dumpling recipes, and they'll be different. And make them both.
I once went on a dumpling crawl. Gene Ha was one of the artists involved, and we went across the city going to have dumplings. And you can only eat so many pot stickers or whatever, but we loosened it up and we included empanadas and a few other kind of things like that. But it was kind of fun. Yeah. And,
Cool.
Yeah.
That would be one of the reasons why I wanted to ask Hilary, apart from the fact that I am a huge fan, is if you look at his Facebook page, he's always posting about some lunch that he had, and
Yeah, half the people on Facebook hate me for doing that, and half of the other half are entertained. So,
and then some of them invite you to anthologies because of it. So,
yeah, personally, I would rather see what people are eating than the injuries they sustain, because some of my friends keep posting pictures. Oh, look, I'm in the hospital. Look at my leg. Look what happened. I'm like, why do I need to see that? Anyway.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, if you want to, Chuck, if you want to give one last pitch for the campaign, then we can go around and you guys can promote anything you want to do. I don't think Neil could talk about it, but I know he probably has something coming up from Comixology from what I learned at New York Comic Con.
Yeah, I can't talk about that yet.
I didn't think so.
I'm doing a story for them that's going to come out next year. But for those who are interested, I did 2 books over there. One called The Panic with Andrew Moody, and that was a fun little thriller we did. It was like a New York subway thriller set like right at the tail end of the pandemic. And then just recently, I did a book with John Broglio, who I did the story for this book. He and I did a 5-issue crime miniseries that are called Nice Jewish Boys with Ellie Wright, who colored it for us. And that one's actually fun. It's only available digitally right now, but it's about a writer in New Jersey like me who gets kind of drawn into a life of crime when he goes to work for his best friend. He's a caterer who's also running a criminal operation out of the back room of his appetizer store. And so that's actually like a fun little crime, like Jewish suburban crime story we did. And you can get that. I know some folks are hit or miss on Comixology books, but if you want to download the Kindle app, you can buy it on Amazon. We got the whole trade up there, and you can read it on that device. It's fun stories, and I hope more people check it out.
Okay. Next, whoever wants to promote something next, if you have anything, or
I just had
okay, good. Sorry.
That's okay. I just had a book come out a couple months ago from Valiant, Livewire one shot. I've just been doing random stuff that I have, like I say, I'm kind of doing it for fun now. I got a couple pitches. I've got pitches in here and there. I'm waiting to hear from Dark Horse on something it was originally set to do right before COVID hit, but now they have a long list of things that got locked up for COVID, so it's going to be a while yet. I've got a book coming out in a couple of months. Well, they're going to start soliciting it in a couple of months from Moonstone called Bystander, which I'm doing it with Moonstone because they let me do what I want to, and I have, and I've been working with various artists to develop new series, and I'm working on a Whisper has been collected in omnibuses by Comics Mix, and we're also putting together an original graphic novel at the moment with Rick Burchett's drawing it. Last I heard, anyway. Yeah, I haven't really kept up with it. I should probably. What's the other? Oh, and I'm writing a Whisper short story for another anthology that's being kickstarted at the moment, but I don't actually remember what the name of it is. So.
Well, fun piece of comic book history. That was Norm Brayfogle. Wasn't that Norm Brayfogle's first actual professional assignment, Whisper?
I don't know if it was his. I think he had done a story before that, but someplace. But it was his first series. Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. Norm actually told me once that was where he learned how to tell stories. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky to ink and tying all this stuff together. Alan Moore wrote the story. It was a Bob Violence backup in American Flag. And it was nuts, as you can imagine. Bob Violence was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say what I've been working on. Maybe like Stephen, I'm just sort of doing things here and there, wandering around. I've ended up in a lot of anthologies and did a couple of stories recently for a German underground called U Comics, and Dennis Kitchen. I knew Dennis got me involved in that book, and then I did another story, and I'll probably do more. There's somebody that'll let you do. It's underground, so you can do literally whatever you want. There's no rules. Sometimes it's shocking to see what the other people are doing in the book. But the last thing I just did right prior to working on it was the first story I've ever done in 3D that will be printed in 3D, which I've wanted to do for a long time. And it's a book around the 1950s movie, one of the worst movies of all time, Robot Monster. It's Robot Monster 3D comics or comics in 3D, something like that. And it was just really a blast to think about how this was going to be separated into 3 dimensions. And I've looked at least one of my pages with the glasses on, and it's just, it's a really 3D preceded me. I mean, in the 1950s by a few years. But I've just always been fond of that. I wouldn't want to look at 3D all the time, but just as a novelty, I wanted to do a story in 3D, and so that was a blast. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, but I'm wandering around so much. I even do mini comics just on my own, just for fun. So
if you go to Hilary's table at any show, you can get mini comics.
Well, I mean, they will from now on. Yeah, I don't always have them, but. Well, I haven't always had them, but I will soon. Yeah.
So,
anyway, yeah.
Well, I have a number of series that are coming out next year. A few that I can't say where from now, but I can say that I'm finally not at a really tiny publisher, which after a long time, that's a notch in my belt, I guess. I've got a book called The Claims Adjuster, and being in my insurance life, it was fun to write with Jason Michalski and Jeremiah Scheich are on it. I have a book called Gun-Toting Bible Banger, which will be coming out as well, 5-issue series. There's a little bit of spirituality and some supernatural in there, some politics, some race, some racism. Anyway, proud of it. A book called Christopher Kubrick, Nebraska and Matilda Save the World from Fucking Nazis. That will be coming out next year as well. And then one called Menkai Ronin, which I'm writing, Hilary, with someone that you introduced me to, which is Jeremiah Wolf, from Drink and Draw Chicago. So, so those are all coming out, but what I'm focused on, like right this second, is pots and panels. The reason we're all here, and I hope that you, if you're watching this, that you will give us a chance to earn your pledge and your backing. Take a look at it. It's at Kickstarter right now. It's got about a little over a week left. Like I said, we will fund. I'm 100% sure of that. I mean, we all know that can happen. If I just hope that it funds, like I said, the way we want it to fund. But I know it will fund. Take a look at it. Steven's entire story is on there because it's so fun.
Oh, really? I didn't know
yes,
that.
it is. You are the one story that I think we did 2 on the Kickstarter page. So if you want to read Steven's story, go there, and then that's just 1 of 50, man. You can get this book. 1 of 50 stories. So
2 things I thought of. The last thing I want to say about my story is that I decided to write it like an old EC story in a style that just isn't used anymore, with the narrator talking to the lead character in the story and asking questions of the lead character and things. And they used to do it a lot in EC Comics, and it was great fun to work in that style because you just don't see it anymore. And I was just wondering, this is an actual comics anthology you can actually share with your mother, wife, or girlfriend, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we've got some
Because if they
Steve
don't like
Niles.
the comics,
We've got some Steve Niles horror in there, but yeah, absolutely.
But if they don't like the comics, they still have the recipes. So.
Yes, it's the perfect comic book. It's like the movie For Love of the Game. If you don't like sports movies, but you like romance movies, that's the perfect mixture there. That's what we have with Pots and Panels.
And I realized that was a little bit sexist, and that was unintended. But you can share it with anyone who likes food but doesn't like comics. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe, Stephen, maybe in some couples it's the guy who's into food and the woman's into sports.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, but so I hope everyone will try it.
So,
I hope everyone will get it.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys, and again, thank you for taking the time out of your evening to do this. And we'll continue to follow the campaign over on Comic Watch in our weekly crowdfunder corner. This interview will be posted there, and if any of you have anything that you'd like to talk about in the future, you're more than welcome to come back. And we'll be back a week. Well, next Thursday with, I believe we have. I think he's an up and comer, Scott Snyder. So I hear he's going to break. He's going to break up pretty soon. He's okay. Yeah. So, but as my co-host usually likes to say, the world can be a terrible place. But be nice, do something for someone else, support your local comic shop, and just be a good person. And we'll see you next time.